Hello, lovelies, and welcome back. I'm your host, Leah Vachani, and I have an amazing guest to introduce to you today. So, Lara and I met over on Instagram, actually. And you know, when you find someone, you're like, wow, this woman is amazing, and I need to get to know her, and I need to pick her brain. She is that person. So, let me introduce her first. Um, Lara is a practicing physical therapist and yoga teacher for 28 years. Lara received both her undergraduate and graduate education from Duke University, and as a licensed physical therapist, continued her studies with a postgrad specialization in neurodevelopmental training with recovering function organization through Stanford. I'm sure you're going to break that down for me, Lara, in a minute. Combining her educational background in physiological studies and her passion for movement, Lara completed her 200-year teacher, 200-year, that's probably how much knowledge you have, 200-hour teacher training. After several years of teaching, she noticed a void in the inclusion of anatomy in the conversations of yoga training. So, in the years to follow, Lara began to refine the LYT yoga method, combining physiology, kinesiology, neurology, and functional movement patterns to yield a more cohesive movement philosophy. Love that. The LYT yoga method in person and online teacher trainings have codified her technique that is now shared by hundreds of teachers around the world. Additionally, Lara teaches international retreats, workshops, and festivals and shares her passion for movement and wellness on the award-winning Redefining Movement podcast with over 3 million downloads. That's amazing, Lara. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and be a part of this incredible opportunity to talk to you and others.
Yeah, well, we're probably more excited because, well, okay, let me say one thing before we start. If you are a woman who suffers with chronic pain, I feel your pain, literally. I am dying to talk to Lara today because we're going to be talking about flip the script. Pain is optional. And if you are someone that has chronic pain in your life, it permeates every aspect of your life from the moment you wake up to the moment you put your head down, and sometimes even through the night. So, Laura is going to talk to us about how we can, well, you know what? Let's just let Lara tell us what we're going to talk about.
Well, I think this idea of chronic pain is many can relate to. And if you look at studies that do polling, there's an abundance of people, especially in Western culture, that have some form of chronic pain, which is pretty much labeled as you have consistent pain that stays with you after 6 months, that it doesn't really go away. It might fluctuate, and then it becomes something that you're living with, and you might or managing, but a lot of people will talk about living with. And I think the idea of pain is, I've said this before in interviews. I actually try and not use that word too much because it actually has this it's like its own onomatopoeia. You say it and your brain has been taught to associate that word with a feeling that is negative. And if we look back, like when we were kids, or if you've raised kids, and there's all these sensations we feel. We feel excitement, we feel fear, we feel joy, and pain is a sensation. It's something that we have labeled as such because that's how we've identified it. So if a kid falls down and they just get back up and we don't make a big fuss of it, they're not going to have a response, and they don't really have anything that's major that's stopping them and triggering that kind of pain response. They'll just get up. But if we start to say, "Oh my gosh, did you hurt yourself?" And then there's a lot of identifying factors around pain. Let me always preface pain by saying it's real, right? So what you are experiencing is real. Unfortunately, because our modern medical model is really based on what's called a biomedical model, which is looking at disease and diagnosis and the etiology, like how it came about, and then the intervention. And it doesn't look at all the other factors that we would want to look at when we think more of pain as this like biopsychosocial model, which is different. It's going to look at like origins, social factors, psychological factors, biological factors, and then all of these integrating into this kind of experience of pain that we then label as an illness or, chronic pain disease. And then when you talk about like chronic pain can happen with anybody, but say you start having it when you're older, it can start having like this impact on your idea of aging and your idea of like the experience of aging is, and I'm feeling pain because of that. So we like to have this kind of causal relationship with pain. I fell down and bumped my knee, and that really did hurt. That caused pain. Um, and so it's a mystery and very stressful when we can't really identify the exact cause of it. And what I invite people to do is start to realize that pain is just an opinion of the brain. This is not my saying, by the way. Many neuroscientists say this, that it's an opinion of the brain. And so, or it's the brain requesting a change. Something you're doing is leading into this. And so instead of fighting it or thinking of pain as an enemy, think of it as just an informant, and we don't want to shoot the messenger. It's like we want to really understand how we can make our body and therefore our nervous system through our body feel safe. Because when the brain feels safe, when the body feels safe, it really minimizes the experience of pain. Because again, pain is real. It's multifactorial. There's lots of things that can contribute to pain. And so a few things that can contribute to pain that's really good to know about, because I think it can make you feel very hopeful if you have chronic pain, is that whatever reason the pain is existing, there are things to do to remedy that. And that's because we have this beautiful, wonderful, big old brain up here that has the capacity for what's called neuroplasticity. And that means we can reorganize the brain. People who experience chronic pain are having some kind of, for lack of a better word, malfunction in their brain, and it needs to be reprogrammed and reorganized. And there's
So
yeah,
it's
go ahead.
it's not in my head because it's real, but it's also in my head because there's some sort of
Yeah.
feedback or malfunction loop or something that's not connecting
Yes.
correctly.
Because what happens so neuroplasticity is the brain is constantly available to change and will change based on the input given, right? So if the input that's given into the brain had started at some kind of, let's just say, stress. So the frontal or the part of the brain, the hindbrain that is associated with stress responses has been like in heightened mode. Say that happened when you're in your 20s. You had a period, there's like input anybody's story, like that could lead to stress. And that we're individual. And this is the other thing that unfortunately the modern medical model doesn't identify, like every individual's biopsychosocial behavior, biochemistry is all individual. So what stressed you might not have the same impact on me. That doesn't mean it's not real. It just means that all the other parts that influence neuroplasticity and influence the brain and behavior had like kind of an atmosphere or ecosystem that set you up to have a different response. And that response created what's called central sensitization, which means your brain kind of hyper focused on this stress response, and in that gave out signals that for pain. So pain is a signal. It's not like you can have tissue damage. So let's say like I fell on the ground and I really hurt myself. It's signaling for various reasons, a pain response, in addition to other responses, so I can have, healing and inflammation and all that come in to do its job. But if you have had not necessarily an injury to a soft tissue that is long lasting, like chronic pain you would think, there's been a disorganization in the brain where it's hyper reactive. And so to get back to what you said, the pain you're experiencing is real. The threat is not real, meaning it's not actually in alignment with the responsiveness. So, but it's really hard to imagine, like, wait, that one I've had, it's called maladaptive neuroplasticity. Like somehow my nervous system adapted that it's like some people are very reactive to stickiness or to temperature changes or to pressure. And your brain's opinion was, I need to give you this discomfort in the form of pain stimulus because that's like, I'm trying to protect you. But it's a maladaptive strategy. So the pain experience is real, but what the root cause of it is not necessarily, it isn't consistent with the responsive or the longevity of it, right? So then you say, well, what do I do about that? Like, so can you kind of, like, for you, do you remember when you had some kind of stress flare, let's say, where you had stress chemicals released by the brain that responded, and it might have been like I had an injury to my neck or whatever? Or do you remember any specific incident or time period where this was starting to happen?
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that. Like, is it something that we may attribute in our head to an event that happened? Like, for example, I was a collegiate Division I rower,
Mhm.
and that's when a lot of my back problems and pain started. Couple that with college, which is stressful in many regards. And being a young adult to me was very stressful. Um, in my head, I'm attributing my chronic pain. Oh, it started, 20 plus years ago. But maybe that's actually, are you saying that I've kind of created a narrative in my head that I'm sticking with, but I could shift that and it may not even be what's actually happening in my body?
Well, and so again, it could be that there was a structural issue. Absolutely. In fact, I've worked with many rowers and I know there are absolutely structural issues. And that's what I teach about. That's why I teach good body mechanics, because it's to avoid the stress or distress placed on any part of your body, whether it's the muscles, the joints, the fascia, the connect, any of that, the ligaments, and then the imbalance. So, for instance, in rowers, you're using large muscles that overlie smaller muscles, and so the smaller muscles' big responsibility is to anchor. So they need to anchor, and then you're doing this big action with bigger muscles, and their kind of strength relationship gets out of balance. So the movers, the bigger muscles, get stronger, and the structural ones, the smaller ones, also known as your core muscles, are not as strong. So you think collegiate athletes, I worked with Olympian rowers, like they're strong. They are strong, but they're not adaptively strong. They're not strong in both in those really smaller proximal core muscles, in relationship to how much force production their bigger muscles. So there is a strain that's created. That's why so many rowers have rib fractures. Like, how do you fracture a rib? You fracture it, there's too much torque and force without enough of those anchoring muscles to manage it. So for you, and for a lot of people, there can be a structural damage, but that damage doesn't last 20 years.
Yeah.
So what it could do is create anticipatory pain. Which means like, I hurt that so here's an example. I'm somebody, you like, let's say instead of rowing, you were vacuuming and you really did hurt your back, right? Like can happen. So what you start to do is you look at the vacuum cleaner and you associate that with the event. And then anytime you pick up, you start that vacuum again, you've already set up your nervous system to send signals because it's really, again, the pain is the brain is trying to protect you. And it like you've created this memory loop, not intentionally, it's just part of it. So what we have to do is that's that sensitization. We have to desensitize. Like I would go to somebody and be like, you're going to go over there and we're going to prep. We're going to do some things on the floor, get your body really ready. And then you're going to be like, I'm ready to vacuum and let's go. And we're going to go slow. You start slow, you prep the body, you prime it, and you have to kind of rewire and reformat that association that is actually very real in terms of the pain you're feeling. I mean, that would be like an extreme example, like, but people will see it. Like they did something, they had pain, they have a memory of that. It was very strong. They want to avoid that. So they go into hypervigilance and then, oh, I can't do this. So I see this all the time. I can't get down on my knees. That'll hurt my knees. Okay, well, that is a real story you're telling yourself. It doesn't mean that you're a wimp or you're wrong or whatever. It's very real in your nervous system. So I'm going to teach you, actually getting on your knees is great. We did that our entire lives, but you might not have done it in a while. Let's better prepare you for that and reroute this kind of brain mapping in that form of neuroplasticity to change that idea and association you have, but to strengthen it and fortify it through what's called neuromotor repatterning. So all that breaks down to meaning is like when we know how to move well and our brain gives the signals to help us move well, and that there's no perfect, but better, like optimal, we're set up to move and feel like free and pain-free and great. And so, but we have to kind of go, like when you've had chronic pain, you have to really detangle, desensitize. So is there a movement, for instance, where you're like, oh my gosh, every time I do that movement or this type of, if I go for a run, I feel pain for 5 days later?
I was just going to say, I think that as women age too, into our 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, we do start to have these interactions where maybe we did yoga or something and our wrist hurt the next day. Oh, I can't do yoga anymore because it hurts my wrist. Or I can't, throw a ball anymore because my shoulder hurt the next day. So I think you have a huge audience right now that would love to know, like, especially as we cross over into the 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, how do we retain our movement or even like improve our movement?
Yes. I've worked with people who are moving better in their 50s and 60s than they were in their 20s and 30s. And some of it comes back to this. We weren't taught about our bodies. We weren't taught about what are our biggest, like our hips and our knees are our biggest synovial joints. Well, what does that mean and why is that significant? We should be able to keep them healthy and working for us for decades. So what I say is if you're starting something in your 50s and you immediately feel like some discomfort, just think that's a quicker signal. Thank you very much. It doesn't mean stop. Exercise is the thing that will induce the stress chemicals to diminish. And that's what we first have to do. So you need to know movement is good. And in fact, it's an absolute requirement for aging. You have to move. And I would dare say, and I think the research is supporting this more and more, you have to move more. You have to move more, but you have to move smarter because the things that you might not have like necessarily felt in the same way in your 20s, you're feeling more now. And that's a lot. There's a lot to go. It's not like, oh, I have old joints now. It's much more layered than that. It's also you have, history of like, again, the way your body responds to things. So be smart. Like, so for instance, my type of movement, it's called LIT method. LIT stands for Lara's yoga technique. It's really the intelligence of yoga or the mindfulness of yoga with the intelligence of physical therapy. Because what I saw is people would go to yoga class and a lot of yoga teachers are amazing. They're passionate about yoga, but they're not taught about the body. And when you're teaching them movement, which is the body in motion, and you don't know like principles like neutral spine, neutral pelvis, what does that mean and why is it important? Then you're going to teach kind of poses, imitation. And when you learn about the body and you can teach principles that are universal, even if they look different on different people, they are kind of universal principles of biomechanics, meaning how you move your body in a very efficient way. Efficiency is going to always keep you like safer and stronger and have more energy because you're being efficient. So I would recommend one, making sure that you're going and learning from somebody who does understand the body and isn't saying, you're 50, you kind of just probably should just take walks and stuff. No, we have the same capacity. We might have to spend a longer time in that rewiring of neuroplasticity stage because some of our habits have to be rewired, right? That's what all habits are just like. Pardon me?
I said, did you hear that, ladies? Do not settle.
No, do not. And you
Really.
know, like really, we've got to move and we've got to challenge ourselves because challenging ourselves through movement is part of that input to the brain. That's when it says, I can handle this. I'm hardier. I'm also safe. Like safety is not the absence of challenge. It's not. So your brain isn't going to feel safe sitting on the couch just because you're not exposing it to things that it might perceive or you might have perceived in the past to be like dangerous or harmful to your body or whatever. It is not in the absence. It is actually through the challenge that you will change. You will change the neural pathways. You will change associations you might have had, things that you were told, like, oh, women are this or women are that, or like when you go through menopause, yes, you will. There are changes hormonally that will be challenging. Okay, let's just know that, but don't, be defeated by it. So we know we need to, continue moving and improve and in fact move more. I would argue we know we need to work on cardiovascular, our cardiovascular system. And chronic pain, like let's address it instead of putting a band-aid on it. Let's address it through better movement because better movement is the best way to give that input to the brain that you're safe and that you're fine and that this is something that served you. And that's what I always like to say. Again, it's in your mind. That doesn't mean you're crazy. Like it's very real. It's very real, right? But it's that you can say thank you. You played a part in whatever happened. You were trying to protect me. And that's what's so great is if we can, I guess my overall like getting out of the science part of it is like befriend your body, befriend your brain and your body and know that a great way into your brain, staying sharper, preventing cognitive decline, improving, problem solving, spatial awareness, everything is through movement of your body. It is like the elixir. So, and it's not just because I'm a physical therapist saying it. It's also because I've looked at the neurology. It's like the fact that we're not moving enough in our society is a big player in not feeling great and feeling defeated and feeling lethargic and feeling pain. Lack of movement also contributes.
Well, they say sitting is the new smoking, and I can completely see why. There's
Yeah.
also a scary stat out there that I think it's something around a high percentage of people over 60, if they break their hip, they will die within the year. Because everything is compromised, like you were just saying, not just movement, but also it affects all the other systems. And so I think what you're saying is really important. The other thing I think that you're touching on, and that I'm hearing you say, is that, you know, our pain is a signal, right? There's our brain is trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
Most of us try to medicate that or, ignore it. But like there's a lot of ways to medicate, whether it's prescription or non-prescription. And it's not really solving the problem though, right? We have to get to the root of the problem. And I think that's what you teach.
Yes, it is because there again, we our bodies will feel our best when we feel safe in our bodies. And our brain registers there's a safety. The brain is setting off alarms because it's ultimately the nervous system is not feeling as safe. So that could be, you could say, well, but I've always been an anxious person and this, but the thing is, your body movement changes that. Your body, when I go into corporate settings or even on my online platform or with my teachers, what I say that your body, your movement impacts every system in your body. It impacts your neurological system. So yes, if you're used to having to take, an Advil or something or whatever multiple times a day, again, no shaming you, but no, there is there's a major side effect to that. That's not great. It is impacting your prostaglandins, which are the things that send signals for inflammatory responses to happen. But there's prostaglandins in your gut that you're also destroying when you are destroying the prostaglandins that send the anti-inflammation signal. So it's really harming you. And really for the moment, there's a place and time. I'm not saying never take them, but that you can't just take something, like you have to look at the underlying issue, and the underlying issue comes back to it. Like your brain has the opinion that you are in some kind of stress response, even if you're like hanging out watching a movie. So I would think, so anybody that is unsure of this, just think like, can you remember a time where you were moving, whether it was walking, hiking, riding your bike, playing with kids, that you felt really great? And, just that's what you got to put in your mind. Remember that feeling instead of thinking of like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to, hurt my back or whatever. You have to rewire the connections. So this different story is truly neurologically encoded that movement is great, because it is. It's so good for you. And, it isn't to say like, don't take medicine or don't have other avenues. But the biggest thing is don't give up. Don't stop moving. And don't ever use age as a limiting factor. You just get smarter about your movement with age. You don't move less with age. I think that's what I would say.
I love that. So, okay, let's say we're all sitting here right now and we're like, okay, pain is optional. I choose to not have pain. What is the first step in that process? Like, what would you tell someone like us to do
I would say, yeah. So first of all, work a lot. So getting back to you ask, or you said, I'm sure you're going to tell us what that means. My postgraduate certification is in neurodevelopmental training. That's essentially the movement patterns that we did that grew our brain, that formatted our brain from the time we came out of the uterus to the time we started walking and beyond. But those are like those first 2 years, huge amount of programming, because we're figuring out how to elicit the postural muscles, the ones I was referring to, the stabilizers that rowers need even more of. You're floppy at first, and then you roll into your stomach, and you do all this kind of movement to get your back stronger, to be able to lift your head, and then you get up onto all fours, and then you're crawling around, and then you get up in what we call half kneel. So for our lit program, we recreate that every single class. It's called the reset. So what I would say first is go and try one of my classes and do the reset. You're going to get a month free, so go do it. The reset is in every single class, and everyone loves it. And if we didn't put it in, you would feel like robbed. And here's why. Because whatever you're doing in your daily life, and you might be like running and hiking and being very busy, or you might be sitting at the desk writing, you need to reset and prepare the body, kind of prime the body and the communication between the brain and the body, just as we did when we were on the ground, because that's a direct signal into those core postural muscles. And those postural muscles, the reason I'm giving all this background is they're highly related to stress responses. And when they are strong and activated well, we manage our stress better. So think about like when you see somebody standing tall, there is a calm confidence to it. We see it, we feel it when we stand that way ourselves versus if I was crouched over. I'm affecting my axis, my axial muscles, which are the muscles that prime my sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, fawn, all those. So if I'm like this, I'm at, even if I'm like just not even doing anything, my brain doesn't know anything different except the signals it's getting. And the signals it's getting is you're in fear, so work on standing tall, taking up space, and getting those muscles around the spine, pelvis, and shoulder girdle, which are known as your core muscles, getting them activated before you start moving. Because then, and this is what I teach all the rowers, is then you've primed them to do their job well, and then they can manage more. You can manage bigger movements. So then whatever you're going to do next, and do what you love. Like if you love hiking or running or playing tennis, but you need, especially as you get older, because you just, again, had more time for that wiring to not be as optimal, through compensatory strategies or habits or, fear or pain or whatever. We reset. And what we're really doing is we're resetting everything. We're resetting the feeling of hope when you have had pain. I've had so many people with chronic pain, really bad, even like the chronic pain, regional pain, which is truly awful because it's like, it feels like somebody's burning your hand off, or like there's, and it's just the wiring up here. There's no physical cause of it, but it's a stress overload that's compounded with a lot of other things. So what we want to do is get our axis, our core secure, so we feel, because that is what creates that beautiful, like stabilizing, literally from a biomechanical standpoint, but also from a neurological standpoint. That was a lot of information, but I hopefully I conveyed it as
No,
well.
that was amazing. I am filled with immense hope personally for my own journey through chronic pain, but also for all the women watching. I mean, what an inspiration to realize that we can live into our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond by having a high quality of life filled with movement, and that it's going to affect our whole health system. I might get a little emotional, but like for any woman that's watching that's dealing with pain, to have you say there's hope, you can feel vibrant and fabulous over 40 again. I mean,
Yes, yes,
wow.
yes, it's really true. You absolutely can, and you will. I know you will. And some of it is just, think of the unknown and how fear producing that is. So when you don't know if something that you're experiencing that is so uncomfortable, that is so, like impacting your life in all kinds of not great ways, and you don't know what caused it and when it's going away, that's a real burden. And it is like, you will improve, you absolutely will feel as vital as you want to feel. And that's, again, I'm going to say, I've seen it. I've just treated thousands of people, mostly women, honestly, mostly our age group. I'm 54. And I've seen, huge turnarounds. And it doesn't mean it isn't real and you're experiencing it. Doesn't mean wasn't like a tissue or bone damage. But then when it stays, it's something more. And that's what we want to really reassure you that there's something that can be done about that for sure.
Thank you so much. So, ladies, go check it out. What an incredible gift Lara's giving us, and you can work with her and discover her methods. And why not? I mean, we have one life on this earth, as far as I know, and just to be able to live it vibrant and free of pain, and to be there for if you have children as they grow up, maybe your grandchildren, maybe your great grandchildren. Like, give yourself that gift. Why
Mhm.
not?
Absolutely. Amen. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Oh, the gift was all ours. Thank you, Lara. Appreciate it.